Hi, everyone. Today we have Amir, who brings 25 years of experience in leading tech teams. He started his career as a software developer and almost instantly got promoted to being the team lead. And since then, Amir has led high performing teams in over 10 companies, including some giants like Intel and Capital One, where he was a senior director of product management. He has founded and spearheaded product led companies and enterprise projects to worth well over $100 million. And today, Amir is the Chief Product Officer of Blue Triangle, a company based out of Boston, one of my favorite cities in the world. And what Blue Triangle does is they are a platform that help businesses identify friction points in their digital offerings and help them calculate where they are losing customers and revenue. So, Amir, thanks a lot for taking out the time. Would you kick us off by explaining the problem statement of Blue Triangle?
Absolutely. Blue Triangle is in the business of promoting the topic of user experience as a primary driver of business outcomes of the mobile application and web application in front of decision makers such as the product manager who prioritizes the backlog items. Point in time today, there are very few user experience elements that make it to the backlog. And the reason for that is because it's very hard to measure what is the business impact or ROI of optimizing user experience. Blue Triangle measures all of the metrics, user experience on web, it's INP, CLS, and so forth, and correlates that with the checkout or reserving a room or in an enterprise situation, signing up for a demo and so forth, correlates that with suboptimalities and then serves it up to the product manager so they can make informed decisions that are backed by a business case and later on measure it so they can continue the investment in those topics and thus making their way into the backlog.
Understood. And how did you discover this problem? How did you know that there's a business here that can be profitable?
Well, this is an area that I experienced personally, and this is how I found Blue Triangle. I found that there's a significant drive to drive features into any kind of product that you have, and features are highly measurable in terms of user adoption and revenue. Can assess the competitive nature of your product based on feature, but you can never assess the competitiveness of your product based on the user experience, the user delight. So many users leaving your application if it's unusable. And so we went and found that practitioners are well aware and are actually very passionate about improving the user experience when using the product, but these things never make it to the backlog. And so we went and talked to decision makers, product managers, marketing managers, dev lead, and we found that their hands are tied in terms of justifying the investment and prioritizing something that's not obvious from a business
So
perspective.
how were people doing it before? Was there no tool that helped businesses track the impact of some feature in the UI or the UX and directly correlate it with some KPI?
They are primarily detached. Even nowadays, they are primarily detached, two separate disciplines. You have the analytics and business side, vendors and applications that measure, user retention and revenue and things of that nature, analytics platforms, but very few connect them with the technical side of the user experience, technical metrics such as core web vitals or application crashes or memory and things of that nature. So, correlating the business impact with those technical metrics, there's not a lot of people today that do that in the market, who I believe would differentiate it in that perspective.
Yeah, that sounds really useful. So if we can dive a little bit deeper into the solution to maybe kick this off, if you can answer what the outcome would be for the end user, and then we can try to figure out, what the user journey is and how you plan that user journey.
Yeah. So, if you will, the target persona that we are trying to serve, if you will, is the product manager, which is very easy for me to say because that's me. And so, what I would like to do and what I'm implementing in my product is, if you will, 1 minute over my morning coffee, understanding what is my business opportunity, and then be able to go to my first, second, third user story or recommendation that are AI driven and are tied to the technical data, and then hand that over as a user story inside with a Jira integration to my developer. And this way, within 1 minute, I sort of told the team what to do. They're going about it, and I can go on with my day and check in tomorrow and check in on the status of the work that I've assigned, as well as talk about the next recommendation. So it's really a very low touch tool, a lot of emphasis on delightful experience, both for the product manager, but also for the developer who needs all of the data that backs up, that bakes this recommendation, that they have enough data. It's in their workflow. It's integrated into Jira and CI/CD such that they can go and do the work. And we are aware as this is progressing. What's also interesting is that after the fact, when a change is being deployed, we are being informed through the integration. And now we can, since we're looking at all of these metrics, sessions, conversions, average order value, and things of that nature, we can also say, what is the after the fact impact of the implementation of that recommendation? So all in all, we're doing a complete cycle from the premise. If you do implement this recommendation, you will gain, we estimate that you will gain that kind of revenue or conversion impact on your business. And after the fact, we go in and we measure what actually happened. And then we give you the next recommendation based on our learning.
Okay. And how does it compare to the manual way product managers were doing it before? Is there a way to quantify how much time or money is saved or some other metric?
So nowadays it's possible. Before then, like I said earlier, it's an extremely detached and fragmented process. You need to go to your analytics platform to try and analyze what happened from a business perspective. How many users, how many sessions did they check out? How many checked out? And what's really influencing the checkout or the conversion, whatever the conversion event might be. All of the technical metrics such as web page load time, application crashes, application out of memory, and so forth, application network errors, all of those live in completely different platforms. And so all you could do is take a pretty good Excel and try to do it yourself. That is almost an impossible task.
So you mentioned something really interesting. You're a product manager and you're selling to product managers because you kind of lived that problem. Do you think that's really important in finding pain points, building products out of them?
100%. I can tell you from personal experience, I co-founded a business where I was not a user of the business. I didn't understand the business. And from my perspective, I churned out of that business pretty quickly because I understood that I don't understand the very basics of that business. And so being here, you don't, when you found a business, you don't necessarily need to be a deep subject matter expert, but you need to be sort of in the area close enough to understand what you're doing. Here in Blue Triangle, this is a product that solves a personal problem for me and personas like me.
So Blue Triangle didn't start out with what it has today, right? It made a pivot or two before it found product market fit. Can you tell us what it was doing before and how you figured out that the company needed a change of direction?
Absolutely. So Blue Triangle has and always had differentiation in the data that we collect. All of our customers tell us we have very different, highly differentiated data, and that's unique, and that's very attractive, and it's very sticky. However, it's not sustainable. And what we found is that in terms of the traditional persona, which is the developers, SREs, optimization developers, and those type of personas, there are very good tools out there. There are tools that cover areas that we do not cover, such as the performance that we've seen on the server and on the front end. And we didn't plan to go there. And so what we found is that we're really trying to solve a unique problem that hasn't been solved before, which is trying to influence how those learnings are getting implemented in your backlog, right? How those issues are actually being brought front and center in front of the product management and the development team and are actually being acted on, right? So that's the real pivot that we've made.
But how does a pivot affect a company? Did you have to measure? Do you have to measure the risk? Like, are we losing out on something we already had? And is it worth taking such a big risk?
Well, for us, I would say it wasn't a crazy risk, but because what we found is that if you have a platform that is stronger in the end-to-end solution, and we weren't planning on providing an end-to-end solution, we were planning on providing a very niche but very deep and quality solution for a specific use case, right? The measurement of the real user experience on the front end of a mobile app or web application. What we found is that, we're interested in a broader solution. We're already using better platform for that use case. And what we found is, there was a trade-off. So we needed to go and apply our resources to building a new value proposition for a new persona. And that, there's always limited capacity. So it did come with a cost of slowing some things down. But the way to go there, and I think this is where you're going in the next set of questions, is to involve our target user. And our target user is adjacent to the practitioner, right? So we had the practitioner go and say, do you have a problem? Do you see a problem in your organization? And I'm talking here to the practitioner, where these recommendations are actually not being realized, right? So there's a problem, but you are being told to work on the next feature. And we found frustration, right? And that frustration led the practitioner to introduce us to the product manager. And so it was a smooth transition. It wasn't like, okay, we're going to deprive you and we're going to go to that product manager. It was a handshake. And the reason for that, the most important reason when you do this pivot is to go and say, we're not going to cannibalize one persona. We're still going to maintain them because they're part of the workflow that we're trying to facilitate. We need them on our side. We need to give them what they need, but we're now going to help them, right? Help them realize a gap that they are unable to solve today.
And did this pivot change the team structure in any way?
It didn't change the team structure as much. It changed our velocity. So it came in the right time when AI was sort of introduced. And what we found is that working with product managers and now with practitioners on the customer side just created much, much faster cycles. Our ability to innovate and validate on a weekly basis with multiple customers on every feature just got accelerated significantly. And so it's not so much the team structure as much as our practices. Now we are involving users in our creation and innovation, and it's just moving so much faster.
And how did this affect the technology? How much of the original code base was scrapped?
There are parts of the original code base that have had to go through a modernization, and this is technical debt that you have to pay. I would say not a lot, maybe a quarter of the code base had to be sort of rewritten and modernized. But once we've done that, it opens a highway for us to fly so much faster.
Makes sense. And how did you plan the roadmap for this pivot? You mentioned, you started talking to some of the customers you already had, asking them about some of the deeper problems or adjacent problems. But how did you convert those conversations into an actual roadmap?
So, like I said, we kept the practitioners involved, but we really started focusing on product managers. And guess what? The first thing that product managers told us is that our UI is unusable. They're unable to use our UI because our UI was very detailed, very technical, aimed for practitioners. And so we said, what are the 3 top problems that you would like to solve? And we were very lucky in the sense that we were all unified in our understanding of the problem statement, ability for a product manager to understand the business impact of making investment in user experience, in user delight, so that the business objectives are met, the ability for them to establish a business case to make those investments and prioritize, and after the fact, report back an ROI to their leadership and their team. We understood that. So this was the base alignment of our conversation. Within that, we said, what are the top things that you would like to see? And they came and said, I want to do this in 1 minute over my morning coffee. I want this integrated into my system because my developer, and again, this is an example where you don't abandon your previous persona. You don't abandon the practitioner. They said, my developer will not go to your tool necessarily. You need to integrate with Jira. You need to create it in the CI/CD. And then the third thing is it's got to be as streamlined as possible. Because me, a product manager at company X, I am not a Blue Triangle employee. This is not my day. This is not my focus. It's important and I want to work for it, but this is not what I'm going to do to my day. So use AI, use automation, use integration, use whatever you need to make me take 1 minute decision and move on with my day and have you guys do your magic.
So you figured out the problem. The product managers told you what they wanted in terms of outcomes or in terms of time saved and such. But to actually put that in the form of feature, you probably had like a dozen ideas right? Like, this is what the product manager wants. These are the 10 different ways we can do it. So, how did you decide what to include in the MVP or narrow down on the right feature for the right solution?
So for me, it was an element of time in order to validate and demonstrate the interest. Right? It's one thing to go and say, "Hey, I would love to use this solution over my morning coffee." If people don't use that, they don't use that. You have no adoption. And so for me, I wanted to take existing assets that I have already in my disposal. I didn't want to go and create new algorithms or collect new data. The data that we have is differentiated and of high quality, right? We have that. We have algorithms that compute the data, that digest the data into good insights. What people complained about is the ability to consume the data. And so the decision is grab what you have, present it in a way that is highly delightful and highly digestible and highly actionable, right? And do that within a couple of weeks, right? And so you don't have all the bells and whistles. You don't have a lot of functionality. Sharing functionality was very important for me between the product manager and the developer. And that made it to the MVP because that is extremely important, right? I wanted both personas out the door involved in the process. And of course, analytics, because without analytics, I can't see anything. And so what we focused on the MVP was presentation of the data, insights and actions using AI, right? So we developed that. I said usability at the beginning and collaboration. So I can, and then of course, analytics, getting telemetry around the adoption. And from there, I established an MVP, and on a weekly basis, we iterate. We add more and more and more. But to me, a very early, if you will, beachhead, and then expand from there with your perspective on adoption at all times. To me, that's the way to go to market, whether a pivot or a new product.
So, you didn't end up building a feature that in the MVP that just didn't come to any use because you just started with something so specific?
Absolutely. From the initial discussion with the product managers and the practitioners, the developers, to the moment that I had a design to show, the first thing that they could touch, I would meet with them on a weekly basis and say, how do you feel about that? Alternatively, even better, I would screen share with them and they would take over the screen. And there's one of those moments where they click on something and it doesn't do anything. And they go, well, why doesn't it do anything? And I said, I haven't thought about it, right? That's the beauty of doing these user testing. But the point being is that if you meet with 3 or 5 users on a weekly basis on every iteration, you really cannot miss because you're building to their requirement. At least those 5 users, and they're probably a good representation of a broader population, they will adopt and use because they designed it.
So, one major problem that new builders have is they find approaching potential customers really intimidating because this requires a lot of time, right? Even from the customer's point of view, being involved, joining multiple meetings. How do you approach something like that?
You give them a lot of predictability. You give them a lot of transparency about what expected from them upfront, and you relay the value to them. And if they understand the value upfront, and of course, I'm describing an ideal situation where people stay with you. Some people will drop off eventually because there's reality. But I think for the most part, what I've seen with users is that if I go to you and I explain the value proposition of the exercise, the validation exercise that we're going to go through, you have trust that I'm going to be very respectful of your time. We might have a couple of pings during the week over Slack, and we're going to have half an hour each week. And that half an hour is going to be highly focused, right? I'm going to give you the new interface, the new demo, the new mock, whatever it might be. If possible, I'm going to let you play with it, right? And I'm going to record this and I'm going to summary. I'm going to send this back to you so you know that I listened to you and I care. And I'm going to try my best to fix it and improve it for next week, right? All of that transparency and empathy and respect of your time while offering something to you that I try to convey, and hopefully I've been successful in establishing interest, deep interest in solving a real problem that you have. All of that come together makes it for an efficient recruiting mechanism.
And do you use any tools to manage all these user conversations and requirements and follow ups?
We have some tools internally. I'm probably not going to go and name them here, but We have tracking over our progress, and I would say some of it is also tracked inside Jira. So we look at Atlassian and Jira, and we use customer names and where we are on the ticket. And that, if you take Jira, for example, and apply AI over it, all of the notes sections are very helpful in doing that. But there's multiple tools out there, and of course companies with a lot of money can invest in better tools.
Got it. So you talked about how you interact with users when building a product, but what was your team like that actually built this? What was the structure? How many people were there?
Yeah, we're pretty lean. We're pretty efficiently company, and you can probably look at the web how big we are. We have been pretty efficient in our operations. We have multi-skilled team, and we're trying to really be very close. We're not even running weekly sprints. We're working day to day on what needs to be worked on, and we also expanded offshore. And I can tell you, our offshore has been outstanding. They're not only implementing what needs to be implemented. They are opinionated, and I say this in a good sense. They have a point of view. They have experience. They bring to the table skills that we do not have. Generally here in our generic team, and it's just been really a wild ride. We're running very very fast.
What do you think are the risks of doing offshore development?
I think that the biggest risk in offshore development is establishing trust, right? It's always if you sit wherever your office is, the person next to you writing code, you probably trust them better than somebody offshore. And then you need to test this code. You need to believe in the quality of the code and so forth. So I think the cultural element combined with the natural skills and experience of whoever is with you working with you offshore. Those are the two big risks. Now, the downside, are you getting quality code? Are you getting code that's going to fail you? Are you getting hard coded values versus, using an API and so forth? What is the quality of the developer that you're working on? I can tell you that we've been very, very fortunate in our ability to work with various developers. And when it didn't work, we told our vendor and they got us better ones. So we have a very collaborative, but I would also tell you that at least from the point of view of Blue Triangle, we expect and I appreciate that they're opinionated. They have a point of view about not just the solution, but also what is the user experience, the value of what we're producing. And so they have been more than implementers. They have been an equal part in innovation and perspective. And that's been a blessing.
And how do you manage both an offshore team and an in-house team with the time difference, the cultural differences?
I would say again, we've been very fortunate that our offshore team has good overlap with our working hours. But basically, we're in the East Coast predominantly, and they've been working through our lunch. So we have a lot of hours and a lot of all days of the week we have overlap. We're trying to be respectful for their nights, but it's been really a blessing to work with them.
Okay. And have you ever come across a situation in which a developer, whether in house or offshore, said, we just can't build this feature, a feature that you want, but you know it can be built? How do you address these issues?
Yeah. I've not come across a situation where developers said it cannot be built because I think developers are really smart folks, but they have articulated the high difficulty of such situations. And I think as a product manager, you go into sort of two scenarios. You go and tell yourself, is this worth the battle? Like, do I have enough things on my plate to go on this battle and think about it and invest in it and so forth? Because it is a little bit of a psychological uh, chess game, if you will. So that takes time, and in some cases, I can tell you, I told myself maybe later. Everything has an ROI. This one isn't worth my battle. In cases, and that's more often than not, in cases that I was passionate or I felt that there was a need for this feature, I went and said, okay, I understand. I understand that that's how you analyze this problem at this point in time. Let's keep talking about this. Let's meet again in a couple of days. You'll get some time to think about this. I will research. Let's think along the dimensions of a reduced size problem that is a stepping stone towards where we want to go. How would you slice it? And I think psychologically, reducing the tension a little bit, giving this conversation a little bit more time to bake, and also giving if you allow the developer to be innovative around the dimensions of the solution, So we don't have to bring all the bells and whistles on day one. We can start from a stepping stone and everything. Essentially, you bring them into the solving process. Now they're part of the solution team, right? And I think all of these emotional motivations bring them to the table, and now you're working as a team. And I think what you'll find always in life and in work is that when you're presented with a problem, when you're presented with a question, your first answer is going to be the least appropriate and the most expensive one. If you think about it in life, if somebody drops an egg on the floor, you will run around a headless chicken and then waste a bunch of stuff and run around cleaning it. And if you think about it for another second, or if it's a real life problem, if you go and sleep on it, you will find that the next morning solution that you thought about is much more efficient, much more realistic, much more appropriate. And I think that's the name of the game, to give some space for thoughtfulness and establishing empathy on the way.
So you were a software engineer. That I'm sure that helps in evaluating how the developers respond to you to the tasks that they've been given. But a lot of product managers are non-technicals, right? Do
Right.
you think being an engineer is critical to being a good product manager?
Not at all. Not at all. I think that um, my advice to non-technical product managers is, and frankly to any product manager, is listen and learn. Listen to the terms, learn the jargon, learn the system, right? And when I say learn the system, I'm not expecting anybody to go and read code. I'm not expecting anybody to know the details of the cloud implementation of the solution, but know enough to be helpful and to be risky, right? Because the right comment at the right time, right? If you go and say, haven't we just worked? Isn't there another problem in a different space that we just talked about it last week? And maybe we can connect the dots here. Being part of the team establishes credibility. And if you have credibility in the team that you are passionate about what we do and you are making the effort to learn, right? You're not detached from the process. That is worth its weight in gold because you are part of the team. You're respected. You're making the effort. And that's what, in every field, that's what people appreciate. If you understand them, you're empathetic to it, you are collaborative, right? And the second part of this answer is, nowadays with AI, with the likes of Claude and so forth, you don't have to code. You can create, if you think about it, instead of going and creating a very long Jira ticket that frankly nobody's going to read, if you can go, for example, to Claude and creating a working mock with believable data, functional with the workflows, and you can walk the developers through that and say, hey, look, when I click on this, this is what happens. This is what I expect, and so forth. Number one, they'll give you feedback. It's a much more delightful discussion, and you are invested. They see that you are emotionally invested in the process, and they appreciate you.
So AI has cut a lot of the loss of information in translation between the product manager and the developer. So would you say that's like the biggest advantage, that instead of now creating tickets, you just create mockups?
I think that it's a very big, whether it's the biggest or not, I don't know, but it's huge. I can tell you it's huge for me and my team, on a personal level. The conversations are so much easier. I can be so much more creative in articulating what is it that I want. And when I go to, whether it's a user or whether it's a developer, when I show it to them, they engage. They start clicking around with it. This is a reality that I didn't have 5 years ago. It's amazing. I'm a geek. I'm spending my weekends on this stuff. So it's mind blowing. How fast we go, the democracy of creating and influencing interfaces across the team. I've got a database developer that created a complete solution end to end from the database to the front end. It's crazy. But I will say this, as a product manager, the other side to my day, I need to run competitive analysis. I need to do SWOT analysis. I need to build a value framework. I need to build collateral for sales. I need to work with users. All of that, I can do in AI at 1/10 of the time. And what that gives me is thinking time, which I desperately need.
So
Amazing.
what percentage of your Jira tickets now take the form of actual mockups? And what kind of tickets still remain traditional tickets?
It's interesting. You should ask. Typically, epics, if you will, if you're familiar with Jira, you'll have initiatives and epics. Epics are the derivatives of initiatives. I try to make it so that every initiative has a fully functional mock, right? Fully functional mock, and then I do make a point to go into the epics because the epics is the detailed breakdown, the details that somebody may miss by utilizing. So when you deal with a mock, you're kind of flowing through it, and you may miss spots on the way. You also, you're bound on time, right? And so the purpose of the epics, the description of the epics, is to fill in the gaps that you may miss, right? It's the complete definition of what am I asking to be done.
Understood. Would you mind telling us a little bit about the tool stack that you have that you use to manage your team, the product?
Yeah, I would say we're very lean, and we're very lean financially as well. And so we're using cloud today for innovation and collaboration, and so forth. We're using Slack and somewhere between Microsoft and Google, Office suite and so forth. And we have our own built-in analytics tool for the product, so we understand what our users are using. And in terms of user interaction, help desk, community, we're using Jira Service Manager.
Got it. My next question is there something that you still have to do manually that AI can't yet do?
Think. I still think a lot. Plan, prioritize. I would say the biggest thing that I'm not using AI for is really the roadmap prioritization. That's something that requires a lot of thought, a lot of consideration. I can have an AI create recommendation for me, but at the end of the day, I make the decision what happens when.
Why do you think AI still struggles with creating the right roadmap? Like one would think, like new builders, especially or vibe coders that started their careers with vibe coding rather than traditional coding or product management, they would say you can just go to ChatGPT, give a detailed prompt, and it'll give you a really long roadmap with explanations and everything. What's missing that you can't apply? Uh,
I think two things. Number one, the data that's being put into the feature. Typically, you're talking to users, you're talking to opportunities, you're talking to customers, and there's elements that are coming from sales, for example, and you don't always have predictability into, for example, the deals that are coming. Some deals are a little less likely than others, and so forth. Similarly, for renewals, that data isn't always clear, right? Um, Features, the prioritization of features has a lot of inputs to it. It's got a lot of dimensions to it. So some are documented, good, bad, or otherwise. Some are not. And so I think that establishing, even if you think about the rice model or any other prioritization models, they're pretty subjective. And so, yeah, AI can definitely come up with proposals, but I think like everything else, it's sort of AI aided, human led. So I think that that's the reality, and I think a lot of product tools actually implement that. You'll have AI propose, but at the end of the day, the humans need to take the wheel.
so now that AI is doing so much of the work, what's the hardest part about getting a product to production?
I would say we're a little bit in transition, and I think that every software company is in transition in terms of developers generating and trusting AI code. I think that there's a lot of best practices questions. Do I need to do code reviews for AI generated code, for example? Or do I just wait? There's a school of thought that says, deploy it, and when it breaks, bring the error, automatically bring the error code into AI. It will self fix and it will redeploy. And to be honest, that might actually work. As a software developer in my past, I kind of cringe thinking about it. And I'm sure every software developer kind of, what's the level of risk in that? But it seems like decision makers are in love with that idea nowadays. So I think that there's a crossing the chasm with AI that needs to happen at the software developer level. But the other piece of this is when you deploy software, you want to drive adoption. You kind of want everybody to know. And so if we accelerate the pace at which we interview and implement and deploy, now users are a little bombarded with, like, these guys are running very fast. And, it's one thing on websites to, pull up a banner and say, hey, guess what? We just deployed this. But even then, I would say there's some tolerance to change. I mean, even users would go and say, okay, well, hold on a second. This thing is changing a little too fast for me. But I would also tell you that if you, for example, there's unique situations where you deal with mobile apps, for example, and we have been making tremendous, tremendous progress with our mobile app SDK. But that thing is like on-premise software. You cannot replace it every minute. In fact, a lot of customers say, every half a year, every year. And so there's also implications in that regard. How often can you actually inform customers, guide them, change the APIs, change integrations? Even if you bring good things to the table, change is still something that you need to manage.
So, would you say the biggest bottleneck in software development now is not coding, but people themselves?
That's a good one. I would say so. I think that humans. I would say this. I would say across the board. AI does not replace humans. And I would say that the notion that you can let staff go because you implemented I think it's not proven. In fact, I think it's proving as a false statement. We need a change in skills, right? And so if you now are writing a recommendation for a customer that basically says, if you improve the onload on this page, good things will happen. You'll see an uptick of $1 million over the next year. If you did that, and now we have AI doing that, the customer still needs the next level of perspective, of human perspective on top of that. If something doesn't work, why didn't it work, right? And so I can tell you, for product managers, for example, if you think about what AI does to us, AI accelerated research preparation. It accelerated interaction with developers and so forth. It just exacerbated the need to think about priorities and deliverables and complete description of the product. So product managers, and I can tell you on my team, are working harder. We need more. We need more hands rather than less hands. So yes, I would say people are even more these days the bottleneck.
So, what kind of skills are like hot in the market now for software developers? If it's not so much of coding, any specific kind of thinking or experience that you look for when hiring?
Yeah. So in transparency, I don't hire software developers. I'm in the product management side of the house. I would say that my perspective is the following. Number one, we need people who are curious. The number one skill that you need nowadays for any job in this industry is people who can adapt and are welcoming change and are welcoming new perspectives. I can tell you, we have one developer who was sort of on the fence with AI, and then we got an interesting opportunity. And over 2 hours on Friday, they went to AI and they looked up the code and it said, wow, actually works. Amazing. And tested it and so forth. We need adaptability, curiosity. We need collaboration. And then I think the ability over time to acquire and leverage those skills that are pertaining particularly to software developer best practices in the age of AI. What are the right prompts? How to tell AI what is the stack that you're using? How to then go and implement it and so forth. These are things that, the industry, luckily, it's an entire industry, practice that we need to develop. There needs to be collaboration. There needs to be curiosity, but there needs to be also the ability, like today, the people that we are recruiting are people that we ask, what experience do you have with AI? Have you tried AI? What have you done with it? What's your perspective on code review before production? Those are the skills that we're looking for.
Okay. And one question a lot of new builders have is, how do you figure out pricing?
So figuring out pricing really has not changed much in terms of sort of product management. It's about finding the value realization metric, right? The value realization metric isn't necessarily an annual license. It's not necessarily usage of infrastructure. For us, the value realization, I believe the direction with we should be going is we come to a product manager and we help them improve their user experience, improve their business goals through investment in user experience. And so what is the token? What is the metric in which we go and say, this was a successful metric? And I believe that usage-based, highly variable usage-based and flexible platform is the right solution for that. So you accommodate for seasonality, for changing needs, but you also accommodate for product-led growth. It's something that we didn't discuss yet, but a platform that allows product managers and practitioners to go around your product, self-serve, and experiment and find new things. And all that you don't pay a license. All that you pay is increased usage in case you use it.
Got it. So you gave a lot of good insights about how to talk to users when you're figuring out what to build. But what happens when the product scales and you start collecting a lot of customer feedback? Either through some self-serve form or otherwise. How do you decide what feedback is worth acting on?
Yeah. So basically, naturally, you can't, the product management organization doesn't scale with the number of users. So you need to use tools for that. There are tools for transcription and analysis of the input. So that's a blessing. I can tell you that, going through thousands of conversations is not fun. It's just not doable. And so people who try to do that just don't do it. So that's a blessing. And I think at that point, the utilization of segments is particularly helpful. You need to have a persona in mind. You need to have an ICP in mind and so forth. What represents, is your customer, is your company strategy more around new logos, retention of existing logos? What is your company strategy? And you align that input with the filter of where your company strategy is. And I can tell you, some companies are religious on no churn, reduction of churn, and their sales strategy is expansions. Okay, that's a segment that you should listen to, probably. Some companies are about grabbing market share and new logos. That's fine. That's your segment. That's what you should listen to. Any changes over time, it should be dynamic, and that's appropriate. And then you find the correlations. There might be, you'll find, we found that one of the biggest correlations around our customer base is usability, right? And so that was unanimous, and we were lucky in that sense.
Has there been an instance where you got a certain feature request from a bunch of customers that you thought just didn't align with the product vision in the long run?
Yes, absolutely. I can tell you a couple of examples, but we still have a couple of customers that would love to use us for various reasons, for deep technical analysis use case expansions, going deeper into software profiling or troubleshooting crashes and things of that nature. These are typically, so you can imagine, we're pushing the envelope as far as we can as it makes sense, right? And there are some features that would take us half or a full man year to go and develop. Those features are available through other vendors, profiling vendors and crash management and whatnot. And so, unless because of the focus of the strategy around the ICP, around the persona, which is a product manager, we go and say that need is better served through integrations. Also because the vendors that are providing that, we're not seeing them as competitive. We're seeing them as complementary. So it's not core strategy for us. So integrations are a perfect way to do that.
Got it. So how would you say AI has changed product management itself? You said, a lot of it is about listening, learning on the go. But has AI changed the job description of the job function itself?
I think it has. I think it has. I think that it allows, I can tell you for me and my team, it allows me to spend more time with users, less time collecting data, analyzing the market, doing, if you will, mundane data collection and presentation. Data collection, digesting this into something that's digestible and so forth. All of that is gone. And I've got a bunch more time, which I'm using. To be clear, I'm busy and I'm out of time, but a bunch of time to spend with users, much more time to spend with users, much more time to iterate much faster on my vision, on my mocks, on my creation, understanding the market, being thoughtful about the roadmap, being thoughtful about things that are so much more impactful as a product function to the livelihood and the projection of the company. And to me, that changed because until now, there was so much overhead. And now we're dealing with what really matters. Number one, the user. Number two, the projection of the company.
Understood. So a lot of people are vibe coding their products in hours, and there's an exponential rise in the amount of software that's out there. But most of those products don't have any users, no revenue. Why do you think that is?
I think that the barrier to create software has basically gone. You can create very nice websites, very appealing offerings, highly easily. It's very easy to do that. And this really gives you permission, if you will, to look away from user adoption for too long. And so questions like, are you creating something that's unique? Are you solving a big enough problem? Are you talking to the users and really honing in on problems that are really meaningful and not problems that they just go and say, okay, so I'll do this over 10 minutes in Excel. Not a big deal, right? Are you pricing this correctly, right? So they can afford it. Or if you're looking for discretionary budget, people, it's good enough that people will go, okay, yeah, I'll put 25 grand on it and I'll try it and I'll use it. So the thoughtfulness, it's interesting. All of the prep work that was required before putting your fingers on the keyboard in creation, I'm not saying that this is necessary before you start doing anything. It's necessary to do all of that legwork, right? But you can't dismiss it all the way until you ship something. You can't leave it, right? You have to do it at some point and ideally earlier than later. So you understand who's playing around you. What is the market? Is it a saturated market? If so, how do you differentiate? Who's the user? Who's the ICP? What's your first landing point? What are you going to offer first that will get you 10 users, even if they're free? 10 users that would say, oh my God, this is the goods, right? And I don't think it's being done enough in those products that don't gain adoption. I think that's the core problem.
What's interesting is it sounds like what these builders should be doing is a lot of how you spend your time now, just talking to users,
Yes.
time that you no longer have to spend on manual work, stuff that AI can do. Does that mean all vibe coders should actually be playing the role of a product manager rather than a developer?
Ideally, right? Ideally, there's no reason if if you're working on something, and particularly if it's your idea, you need to talk to somebody who you want to use it, right? You got to be passionate about it, and if for example you're developing something that you say, I'm developing this to my purposes, like in my case, right? It's great. Find three other people that look like you. And so I'm a big advocate, and I've always been a big advocate of developers talking to users. Now, okay, the logistics and facilitation that can happen through product management, it can happen through sales. That does not matter. But my point is this: more opinions is better than no
Do
opinion.
you think that part could ever be automated? Talking to users, doing the research, prep work.
Automated, yes, not replaced, right? Here's my point. There are companies out there that take your existing product and any modifications that you apply over them and serve that to the customer. So the customer can actually, or prospect, they can actually use it and give you feedback in line, right? That can happen. But adoption is also an emotional journey. I believe you don't have to do this every day, and you don't have to do this every time you release something to the user. You need to project to the user that you are empathetic about their point of view and you're interested, because the user will take you through that emotional journey of adoption. And they would tell you, there will be users who would tell you, yes, I had this gap. Yes, what you created solved this gap. I'm actually not going to use it. And here's why I'm not going to use it. In retrospect, this is probably not as big of a problem as I thought it was. And if you do it only through automation, you will never hear that. And that's unique insight that only humans can interact with one another.
Do you believe that solo vibe coders with no technical background can build like $1 million or $1 billion businesses?
I do. I do. I think that it depends. It depends on the type of the business. It depends on, you know, on the stack that you use. But I think it's just a question of time until AI can build complex, robust, and maybe today, maybe I don't even know. Maybe it's happening today. Complex, robust solution with strong data storage, algorithms, and so forth. Naturally, even today, non-coders can build something pretty robust and then go offshore and on very low cost and get very far. If you think about it from a funding perspective, you can establish an MVP, right, which doesn't have all the bells and whistles, and go and have 10 users using it and swearing by that. Take it to an angel investor and say, look, I've got 10 users coming back on a daily basis. You will probably get money based on that. And then you can go offshore. Then you can bootstrap it and go offshore and so forth.
Do you think in the future people or companies would buy off the shelf products if coding becomes so easy? Won't companies just be building everything they want in house?
I think that focus is still going to be a challenge. We talked a little bit earlier about, are people still going to be the bottleneck? And my answer is yes. I think that companies like us, even in the age of AI, we still decide not to build some things. We still source some things. We use email software, we use Slack. We're not going to go and build Slack, right? And so I think it's somewhere in the middle. We use AI and it saves us some time, but not everything.
I get why you would stick with a tool you've already been using. Sometimes companies are vendor locked in, like, or let's say Oracle's been using Salesforce for the last 10 years. They, there's just no point in moving to a different software or creating their own. But what about new tools that they realize they need? Would they still go and outsource it?
It depends. It really depends on the adjacency to your core strategy and your go-to-market strategy, right? So I would tell you, I looked yesterday at a solution that looks at our internal planning. What do developers do? What are they going to do next, and so forth. And I was thinking, okay, I can take a tool from outside. I can use a Jira Rovo. I can build my own tool. And I can tell you, there was, even though that particular tool, it's an interesting example because that particular tool was away from our strategy. We're not in the business of analyzing Jira tickets and so forth, but it was low effort and it was a lower hanging fruit, and maybe we'll go for it, right? It's a probably a couple hours worth of work and we can save a bunch of money, where capital efficiency, the market today is about capital efficiency, and maybe we do it. So I think it's a matter of the size of the investment, and it's a matter of adjacency to your core strategy.
My last question is, what is one decision that you made while leading a product that you can think back to and maybe say that, okay, I should have done that differently?
Yeah. I think that sometimes you get a little excited in pursuing specific opportunities. And what you realize is that in truth, some opportunities are meant to happen and some not. And you really need to keep your eye very close with the opportunity, to at some point come and say, okay, maybe not all the eggs in one basket. Maybe we move a couple eggs out so that we maintain, serving our existing customer base. They say a dollar churned is 10 times a new dollar. So supporting our customer base and keeping a good balance. So sometimes excitement is good. Sometimes excitement can get you distracted a little bit.
And do you have any foundational advice for all the vibe coders out there that are just starting out there building a journey?
It's great to be excited about what you do. It's so addictive. It's so awesome. I love it. I do it myself. Keep an eye on reality around you. Does anybody need what you're trying to do? I mean, if you're doing this for a hobby and you're going to use it yourself and it solves the problem for you, hey, knock yourself out. Great. But if you want to make a living out of this, if you want to establish your financial security and predictability out of this, you need at all times to have 10 people that you can call off like immediately and show them what you're working on. And they will say, they may say, we don't like the color. They may say, we don't like this feature, but they will say, if you built this, I will pay for it, right? And I will come to this, to your service on a daily or weekly basis, whatever the service is. Keep your eye on reality, because if you detach yourself from reality and from the users, you'll have no adoption. And adoption is the name of the game. Everything goes around adoption.
Perfect. Amir, thank you so much. This was so insightful. There's so many things that I think builders can take away from this. People just starting out their product building journey, and people that have already been working on it for quite a while. So thank you so much for your time and your insights, and I would love to hear from you again.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much.